Greetings, people of the interwebs. Jake here, and in this video I'd like to kind of compare the differences between the current Marvel and DC run of comics. Because I'm sure a lot of you were aware, if you've been following the channel and been listening to some of our more recent podcasts, you kind of already know where me and the rest of the Pace of Hell team kind of stand on, the current Marvel run of comics and then DC Rebirth. But I'm just going to do this video to kind of shed a bit more light on the matter at hand, and just kind of comparing the different, marketing strategies between the two. So first off, it's kind of weird because it's almost like the two companies have completely flip-flopped. Because kind of the latter part of last year and early part of this year, Marvel were doing really good with their comics. In my opinion, that was pretty much all I was reading were Marvel comics, and I'd pick up a handful of DC here and there. Which, granted, that wasn't because I didn't like any of the DC titles at the time. It's just I was so far behind on my DC that there's only so many titles I could keep up with. Whereas a lot of Marvel stuff had just, it was post-Secret Wars. And so I was kind of able to start fresh with some of these new Marvel titles and all that stuff. Whereas now, it's the complete opposite. After Rebirth, because I read some of the, DCU comics and stuff like that I think were kind of hit and miss with a lot of people, post-Convergence. But right now, in DC Rebirth, they are just killing it. All the stories I've read so far have been excellent. Even the weaker ones, which I feel... I even feel like saying one story is weaker than some of the others is still not a good way to describe it, because again, so far they've all been so good that, yeah, even the weaker ones I'm still really enjoying. Whereas normally if there's a weaker storyline for certain characters, something like that, I usually end up dropping it after about 3 or 4 issues, or however long. It's kind of, I don't know, usually at most I'll let it finish at least the first story arc and then I'll drop it. But all the DC Rebirth stuff have been solid so far, and I am eagerly awaiting to read more of the current stories like Aquaman, Green Arrow, Wonder Woman, Flash, or some of the ones that I've been reading that I really enjoy. And also picked up Red Hood and the Outlaws Rebirth, which I like the first issue of that, and I'm looking forward to reading more of that one. And I should really, really learn to turn my phone off when I record these things. You would think after a year of doing this, I would learn that lesson. But yeah, and also there's some other upcoming DC stuff or Rebirth stuff that I'm sure I'll pick up. Whereas, in the past few months, really the only Marvel stuff I've been reading are Hercules, which that got canceled, unfortunately. Moon Knight, but that was a limited series. I think it was only an ended issue 5 or 6, which I did like that. And I'm currently reading Punisher, and I was reading Doctor Strange for a while. Sadly, I've fallen behind. But those are the only Marvel titles I've been reading for a while. And now it's pretty much just Punisher, because Hercules is canceled, Moon Knight is done. I need to get caught up on Doctor Strange, but Punisher is the only one that I'm kind of, as of right now, still following. Just because right now there aren't a whole lot of Marvel stuff that I really want to read. And again, I'm not, don't let me be, I'm not the end-all, be-all deciding factor of which is better and which one you should read and which ones you shouldn't. This is just me personally, and just kind of how things have completely flip-flopped for me personally in the past few months. Because I feel like the way DC are doing it is better than Marvel right now. Not just because of DC making pretty much all their titles $2.99, which that in itself is a great marketing tool. Just because, one, your comics are now roughly about $1 cheaper. So that makes people more willing to buy comics. And really, in truth, I'd say DC are still making just as much money, maybe even more, by lowering the price, because it's kind of a psychological thing to where you see $2.99 instead of $3.99 I think was the typical price, with like New 52 and DCU. Um, so it's almost like your brain is telling you, oh, well, it's $2.99. You can afford more, and I guess in a way you kind of can. You can buy like 2 DC comics right now for just a little bit more than the price of one Marvel comic. But it's one of those things where like if you're like me and you're only able to go to the comic book shop like every couple weeks. It's one of those things where like when I pick up titles, I see all the DC ones and I'm like, oh, that's only $2.99. I'll pick this one up and that one and that one, and I usually end up spending about $35 in comics, which is probably more than I should be spending. But hey, it's worth it. And I've been liking all the titles I've been picking up. Whereas like, when comics, both Marvel and DC, were $3.99, I really had to pick and choose on which ones I wanted to pick up. Some of them I would kind of go out on a limb, like Hercules. I went out on a limb and picked that up just because why not? And I was pleasantly surprised with it. But even still, like when which is weird that $1 makes that big a difference. But for someone like me who's on a budget, I do have to be a bit more smarter on what I pick up. So even though I'm very much aware of the I don't know, the fact that like I'm really not even spending less on comics than I was before, even though DC titles have gone down in price. But it's still, I guess it's more appealing. It makes me feel better. It makes me feel as though I've spent less, even though I'm very much aware that I've not spent less. And I think that like also DC are just doing really, really good with their marketing and also with their storytelling. And right, like I feel like Marvel right now they're doing too much of trying to appease the fans. Like how a lot of people are, have always been complaining about like lack of diversity in comic books, which is totally understandable, and I agree that there has been a huge lack of diversity in Marvel and DC both. However, I think Marvel are like they're adding so many like new characters, or not even new characters, but changing characters up. Falcon is Captain America, and Hulk is Asian now. He's Amadeus Cho. Thor's a woman, and so like some of these I'm okay with. Like Lady Thor, I've heard is pretty good. I haven't gotten around to reading it yet, but I think that first off, there was precedent for that because Jane Foster actually was Thor very briefly, I think back in the 70s. But some of these other characters that are being replaced with pre-existing characters of different ethnicities or genders or whatever, I feel like they're just doing it for the sake of adding more diversity, and they're going diversity first just to appease people, and then worrying about story later. Whereas it should be the opposite. They should do a good story first, and then add in the excuse me, the diversity or ethnic characters. And again, there are obviously exceptions. I'm not saying this is all the case for all the Marvel titles. Or what they should do if they are going to introduce more ethnicity and diversity into their comics, create brand new characters. And introduce them in like already existing comics, like introduce a new Hispanic character in like say Captain America. He can be I don't know, almost like the Bucky of this modern age or something like that to Captain America, and make these new ethnic characters popular. Then once they become popular enough, they get their own solo series, much like how they did it back in like the Golden and Silver Age, where they'd introduce these new characters if they went well. I mean, Black Panther started out in Fantastic Four. He was popular and well-received enough. He got his own solo series. And same with several other characters in both Marvel and DC is they were introduced in a previous series. They were popular enough, and the fans, there was enough want and craving for that character to get their own solo series. And so I think that's the better way of going about it, instead of just taking these already pre-existing characters like Captain America or Hulk or Thor and whoever else, and Iron Man now I think is a 15-year-old black girl, and again, this is all fine, but I just think that it's better to introduce these characters as their own. I don't know, just as their own character before kind of shoving them in position of like, oh, they're the new Hulk, they're the new Captain America, they're the new Iron Man. And also, I just think that's more empowering to start them off as a completely brand new, fresh character and work their way up to becoming more popular and getting their own series. And also, if this isn't the case for everyone, but there are some people who are being actually alienated. That people who used to read the Captain America comics, like the Steve Rogers comics or the Thor Odinson Thor comics, and obviously Tony Stark Iron Man comics, those were their favorite characters, and now they're kind of feeling a little alienated because their favorite characters are no longer them. I know that right now Marvel I think there's like 2 Captain America titles, because there's Steve Rogers Captain America, and then there's Falcon Captain America, and I think Thor Odinson is getting his own series again, while Jane Foster is still the main Thor or whatever. I don't know. I just feel like they're kind of jumbling things. It just seems kind of like they're creating a mess when they should have just did a completely fresh slate after a Secret Wars. Like, I really do wish they had just done a complete reboot of their universe instead of just kind of only rebooting some things. That kind of leads me to another thing too, though, a big difference between Marvel and DC, and something that's irking me a little bit with Marvel. This has been a thing that they've done throughout the decades, is Marvel are very notorious for their events. And events are fine, don't get me wrong. Like, the original Civil War, I thought was fantastic. That was a really cool event that kind of, like, changed, turned the tables and almost changed the whole comic game in general. So I think, like, when it's something like that, where it's this big event that completely, it's a game changer, then it works. It works really well. Whereas I feel like almost since Civil War, Marvel realized how much money they made off that. And again, pretty much any kind of event is a cash grab to varying degrees. But I think, like, maybe not so much Secret War, but I think all this stuff that's going on right now, all these events, because like shortly after Secret War, there's Civil War 2, which the concept of Civil War 2 I thought was really dumb. Like, they shouldn't have done it just to tie into the movie. I thought that was stupid. And then I think shortly after Civil War 2 wraps up, if it hasn't already, there's an Inhumans versus X-Men event going on. And then I think there's Marvel Now, like with an exclamation point, kind of a relaunch event. And I just think that, like, Marvel are kind of overdoing it with these events. Because when I read comics, I want to read the storyline of that particular character. If I'm reading Thor, I just want to read Thor. I mean, it's cool if Iron Man pops up in, like, a couple panels or something like that, or, one of the other Avengers, or, Black Panther or Spider-Man. That's cool when they pop up, but I don't want them to... I feel like all these events and tie-ins to the events are kind of taking away from the individual storytelling of those individual characters. And so it's kind of frustrating when you're trying to read a storyline of, one of your favorite characters, and then this event happens, and sometimes it completely derails from the original story that the writer was trying to do, or it almost forces you to read the main event and some of the tie-ins just that way you know what the hell's going on. And that it kind of irks me a bit. And again, like, I get from a business standpoint, they want to make money, and these events make money, but at the same time, you're kind of, again, alienating your fan base by continuously doing these events and not just letting things breathe a bit and letting your characters just have their own story to tell. Whereas DC, they've had their fair share of events as well, but I think they're spaced more sparsely between one another. And I think that's kind of where they've been doing better just as a whole, and kind of have always done better as a whole, throughout the decades, is they'll do these big events, but they're so few and far in between compared to Marvel that it's not overwhelming. So that's another thing too, though, as to why I'm not reading a whole lot of Marvel right now. Is just because there's so many events that I don't really feel like keeping up with, or they just don't really sound all that appealing to me. But I don't know. Again, that's just me. This was kind of just a quick little video I wanted to throw up because there isn't a whole lot else going on here in the Pasty Pale Productions channel, like podcasts or anything like that we got scheduled. So I figured I'd just kind of do this little video, kind of elaborating my thoughts on the whole Marvel DC comics going on right now. Because again, there's a lot of other people who kind of agree that right now DC are killing it, and then the Marvel comics are kind of declining a little bit. And I want both of them to be on the same level of quality, because I love both Marvel and DC, and I love them equally. I know some people don't, they want me to pick sides, but it's true. I like both of them pretty much the same. But anyways, that pretty much wraps up this video. Hopefully you all have enjoyed it, and I'm really curious to hear what you all think about this topic of Marvel and DC and their current story arcs, and what are your favorite story arcs from either company or both, and do you have a preference? So thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like it, comment, and share. It really helps it up here at Pasty Pale Productions. Lets us know we're doing something right. And also feel free to follow me on Twitter at IrishmanJake, all one word, to just kind of see what I'm doing. And also kind of get updates on when things are going on the channel and all that stuff. And same with the Pasty Pale Pro Twitter page. Yeah, at Pasty Pale Pro, and then on the Facebook page at Pasty Pale Productions, where it's kind of the same thing, just updates on when we're uploading videos, what's the next podcast or next video going to be about, and all that stuff. So that wraps up this video, and again, hopefully you all have enjoyed, and until next time, cheers.